Shape, my little bugs. This is your girl, Empress Goddess, coming at you. I guess I just do this one last live here tonight. This is my guy, Cg DAHLIN, with Christian Celestial Hierarchy. Christian Celestial Hierarchy with my guy, Cg DAHLIN. Let's get it.
Welcome to session 2 of this spiritual studies class. This is on the Christian celestial hierarchy. This is not an easy subject. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about, each element of it warrants an hour class of itself. I will begin by giving context to how the celestial hierarchy came into being. I'm going to need to quote quite a bit during this presentation, so some awkward pauses are definitely in the mix. Now, first of all, the Christian celestial hierarchy is usually only talked about amongst theologians and the deepest knit preachers, pastors. Usually, if you just read the Bible, you're only going to get the references of certain types of angels, which will hint towards the hierarchy. However, as I'll go over, there's other ways that we can come to know what exactly this kind of mythology, this conception is. But I'm going to begin off topic by talking about Greek culture, and specifically the pre-Greek culture, so before the Greeks called themselves the Greeks. This was an assortment of different tribes, I guess you could say, settlements of people who would worship the goddess. Mostly it would be like Aphrodite or Gaia was a big one. This was more commonplace before they had a mainstream religion, which became much more about Zeus. And we'll kind of mention that later, because once a belief system becomes mainstreamed, it has the tendency to adhere to the masculine. Now, the other concept I wanted to mention is that in the pre-Greek culture, there was this hermaphrodite conception, which is literally 2 words, Hermes, Aphrodite. So when they were worshiping certain times, they would be paying homage to a spirit, a god that was androgynous. It was both. So this is something that's going to become relevant later. Now, what people don't speak about when it comes to paganism, and we're going to run into this, is that they did, in these earlier times especially, have a conception of something beyond the pantheon, beyond the gods that they named. However, they viewed this as something that we ought not speak on. And it's not that it was forbidden, it was just that that was so beyond our realm of understanding that we would be foolish in attempting to speak on it. So when the Christians later come up, that's why these higher tier pagans thought it was absurd for them to want to jump straight to the top. So in giving further context in the Greek religions, their concept of the afterlife and pre-existence involved them taking a drink as a soul, taking a drink of what they called leth or lethe, which was forgetfulness. And that is why we do not know of the greater functions of the universe while we are alive, or we don't remember our past lives. Some humans would hack it, and so that they could remember more by not drinking as much of it, or so forth. Now, when one dies, they would be put into a pool of what they called mnemosynthe or mnemosynthe, which is memory. So they would all of a sudden come to know of the greater fabric, and this would unveil to them only after they had died. So again, speaking on this higher celestial order is not doable in their minds. So this is more of what you would call Orphism or Orphic religion than ancient Greek religion. So there's a lot of subsidiaries on the sides. And we're distinguishing them, for the point of this talk, in three ways, the Orphics. So they believed that characterizing human souls as divine and immortal, but are doomed to live in a grievous cycle, is only to serve what they would call metempsychosis, or the transmigration of souls. So during our lifetime, we will be in the grievous cycle, and we will repeat to be. So they mostly believed in reincarnation, but there is this aspect of them being able to escape reincarnation, which kind of bleeds into this celestial hierarchy bit later. The other thing they believed is that if they ascribe to an aesthetic lifestyle, one of exercise, training, self-discipline,
Hey, Rhonda, Yankee
if they
Cat, what's up,
ascribe
my
to this
lord?
way of life, they, through secret initiation rites, would all but guarantee their release from the grievous cycle. So this is kind of hinting towards, and mind you, this is all BC, so this is hinting towards where Christianity will bloom out of. And the third thing they believed is by finding sacred writings about the origin of gods and human beings, they would understand their greater conception in the universe. So there's this concept of them allowing the ambiguity, of not wishing to believe that they are capable of knowing. Now, even when it came to the more philosophical end of things, everybody's familiar with Plato and Socrates and the conception of the world of forms. So they would say things like that souls belong to the world of forms, but the world of forms is invisible and reflective to us, but it rules the body. Ideas are not physical things, so they must belong to the spiritual realm. Now, since the forms are immutable, so is the soul. So what this is saying essentially is that they believed in this idea of a world of geometry, a different dimension. And they're not saying necessarily that we would stay there long, but that there is a separate world. Others would call it the spirit world. So this is the foreground of what the Greeks conceived, and we'll see how it kind of blooms out. So I'm going to start jumping to some notes here and there. Mind you, this is going to be one of the most scrambled talks I'm going to have, because this is a huge subject. So it's going to seem a little bit random, and then later I'm going to try to start to pull these puzzle pieces together. So an offhand reference to the interpretation of Genesis 6, that the angels mated with humans and created Nephilim. And so in the beginning, in this initial Old Testament, there's this speak of what the Greeks would call demigods, but to the Christians, they would call Nephilim. So in both different ideologies, they both have something that's canon of this conception of the gods mating with humans and creating semi-divine beings. However, as we all know, Christians would very much try to bury this. You can find a lot more talk of Nephilim in the book of Enoch, which is not canon to classical Christianity, but to some subsidiaries, because, and this is another theme, the book of Enoch puts the blame of evil in the world on the angels, whereas classic Christianity didn't want to include the book of Enoch because they wanted the blame to fall on humans. We sin, and it's all of our fault. So that's a distinguishing measure, and mind you, the Greeks feel a different kind of way. There's different reasons for why evil exists. So here's where I'm going to get a little. I'm going to give us a codex. So a lot of what we're going to go over today is understanding Ezekiel, the visions of Ezekiel. And mind you, this is a personal fascination of mine. This has always been one of my most interesting sections of the Bible. It is my most interested section of the Bible. So I'm going to start giving you the kind of codex, okay? So in ancient conceptions by the Greeks, Scorpio is not a scorpion, it is the eagle. That is the first conception of what Scorpio represents, okay? Eagle is going to come up later. Taurus is the bull. Leo is the lion. These three are the fixed signs of the zodiac. I'm not going to get into astrology, but they are the fixed signs, which means that they are concrete. Their essence is fully established. The other side note that we need to mention is the Kabbalah. Now, again, I could take more than an hour talking about the Kabbalah, and maybe at some point we will. But I'm going to actually show it to everybody if I can. Here we go. And you'll see my mess of a screen as well. On the left here, we have the Kabbalah, which is the Jewish understanding of the celestial hierarchy. Now, mind you, each of these different sections of the Kabbalah, this is also called the Tetragrammaton. This is also called the Tree of Life, which again is referenced in Genesis, which gives us more to think about. However, in the Jewish conception, in the Kabbalah, they all represent something distinct. They are different realms, and all of it moves from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down to 10 to create manifestations. So there's a lot more lore. There's a lot more intricacy. Each one of these realms, or they have their own word for it. I'm forgetting it right now. Have a lot of detail that go into it. Mind you, too, you can see, if you look at the Tree of Life, that there's all these paths between the realms. All of these paths are also something that can be spoken about, but are viewed as trumps or major arcana of the tarot. So you can see already, I'm talking about astrological signs, and mind you, too, the tarot also includes astrological signs. I'm talking about how that's related, and tarot is related to Kabbalah, and Kabbalah is related to the celestial hierarchy. So that's a lot of the reason why I wanted to give this kind of context. Now, when it comes to the Christian celestial hierarchy, that's what you guys are seeing here. It's the wheel, and there's this kind of escaping, and at the top is the devas, or the depths, or the divine light. So I'm not going to get too ahead of myself. I'm going to stop this here. Now, as far as we need to talk, the Jewish conception of the celestial hierarchy, and mind you, they also believe in reincarnation. There are Jews that believe in reincarnation. They also believe that we are transported to these different realms, as established in the Tetragrammaton. And eventually, maybe if we're lucky, if we ascend high enough, we can reach the crown, or what is called Keter. However, in the Jewish conception of this, there is masculine and feminine. That's a distinction too. So, for instance, the Queen of Heaven, or Binah, you can see, is the goddess energy. So there's God energy and there's goddess energy. There's a splitting. They equalize each other. There's 5 masculine and 5 feminine. It is a little bit more complicated than that, but I'm being simplifying here. Now, mind you, in the early conceptions of Christianity, they did worship Virgin Mary, if not equally to Jesus, but as we all know, this didn't really catch on. And as I noted before, a lot of the reason for why they kind of shooed women out of the canon, not only by replacing certain names in the Bible, which is a thing, which is something else we could go over at some point, but also by kind of inserting certain passages that would demote them. Because when a religion mainstreams, it's basically men who can read, so they want to pat each other on the back, so they're going to make it that way. Not to mention at the times that they were in. So, okay, enough context. What I'm going to go over and how we can understand the Christian celestial hierarchy comes from this guy that they call Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite. And they call him pseudo, which means false Dionysius, because it was commonplace that people would give false names. And mind you, again, here's a Greek god's name, Dionysus. He's calling himself Dionysus. This guy was a bishop in Athens, and I think the 6th century. The only other person that has really published to comment on the greater Christian celestial hierarchy is Thomas Aquinas. And I'm going to give it to you guys exactly as it's laid out. I'll give you a diagram later, but there are 3 different realms in the Christian celestial hierarchy. First is the highest realm, the ones nearest to God. These are the Sephirim, the cherubim, and thrones. Next comes the governing function, the middle function, the separate 3, which is the dominations, the virtues, and the powers. And then the final 3 ranks of the Christian celestial hierarchy are the principalities, the archangels, and the angels. Now, we are only going to go into detail we're going to go into big detail in regards to cherubim and thrones, because they are the ones that are mentioned in the classics Bible. Sephirim we'll go over a little bit, and we'll talk about angels, and I'll mention all that I can, but we have to only concentrate on a few to actually get through this time period. So, taking a quote from Thomas Aquinas, just to kind of get us affiliated. Cherubim know the divine secrets above all, while Sephirim excel in that which is greatest of all, namely in being united with God himself. In keeping with that which is common, this whole hierarchy. The order is that of the thrones, just as in keeping with that which is common to all celestial spirits. The order is called that of the angels. So we call it angels, but that is technically only the lowest end of the hierarchy. However, we can technically consider everything we're about to talk about angelology, different forms of angel. Now, this is strange because what First Testament says, worship no gods above me, right? So there is an admittance that there are higher frequency forms, higher density or lower density forms, higher entities that are beyond the world, the celestial sphere. But we should not worship them. That's their distinction that Christianity wants to make. You should only go straight to the top. And so all of the angels are not worthy of worship. They are different means of the Godhead doing what he wants, creating manifestation, affecting people's minds, so forth. So give me one more awkward moment because, here we go. Now, I had to do so much digging to find this out because if you read Ezekiel, it sounds like an acid trip. It sounds like nonsense. It's very mythical. And so we have to go over what things mean to the people saying them. So like I said before, the eagle, the bull, and the lion will come up a lot. And those, again, are fixed astrological signs, okay? So we could talk celestial. So when winds are mentioned, and when I start reading Ezekiel, this will all come together, I promise. Winds are mentioned, it means rapid action. Something is passing almost instantaneously through all things. Energy movement. Something is being transported from things above or from below. So this is the divine likeness of heavenly minds. They would say, thou knoweth not when it cometh or when it goeth. So that the winds represent an aspect of the divine. When a cloud is mentioned, the minds are filled with super mundanely hidden light. So this is kind of an analogous, it is symbolic of a means of distribution. A cloud is a means of distribution like the winds, and it offers a perfecting quality, which is feeding the womb of the earth. Fire and lightning are going to be mentioned a lot, and as they always are in these texts, fire is literally the closest earthly conception to how they describe the vision of angels or God. Fire and lightning is energy and likeness to God. The reasons for this is that it is a formless essence. The fire is in everything. It intermingles in all things, and we can think of this as heat. It is hidden and unknown in its essential nature. It is uncontrollable. It is indivisible, and it imparts to all things near it, giving light, and is unchanging. That's kind of the paradox of it, is that it's unchanging, but it's forever changing. It's elevating, it's penetrating, it's subject to no groveling, there's no negotiating with fire. It needs nothing other, and it is increasing itself. It is powerful, and it is seemingly that it should not be. It has this strange boundary dissolving aspect. So this is why they use fire as a descriptor. Mind you, everything I'm telling you right now is they have to use symbolism of strange earthly things to capture the meaning of what is seen, these angels when they're seen. So when they have hands, which they do, we'll get to, this denotes the power of making. That's what humans are symbolic of. We have the power of making. So they will have hands. Vision denotes the most transparent sense. So that is why vision is so important. Because smell and touch and hearing would not be as cataloging, as descriptive for writing from one person to another. The reason they will have eyes all over their bodies, which is a thing, is because the eyelids and the eyebrows are viewed as shutters. They're viewed as protection from the light. And when they describe the angels, they say that they are just open eyes, literally everywhere. The feet denote the quickness and movement toward divine things. The wings, which they have many of, denote the elevating quickness of their ability to be raised to the sublime. And extra wings, more than two, denote unearthliness or alienness or otherness. If they have a special likeness to man, this is because of man's ruling and guiding aspects, his intellectual faculties, the superiority of the power of their mind. So that's one part of their symbology. Again, the lion, leading, robust, indomitable, the assimilation of the unutterable Godhead. The ox, strong, mature, turning up the intellectual furrows. So it's not about being intellectual in this one. It's about concentration, determination. And their horns are guarding. That's a part of their function, is if they have horns. The eagle is kingly, soaring, swift, quickness in seeking the nourishment of which makes it strong. It has agility, cleverness, and the unimpeded, unflinching gaze toward the divine rays. It is literally what is most high. We won't get into it, but just as a little thing that I wanted to throw in there, when horses are used in symbolism, this is about obedience and docility. So when you see a white horse, it's brilliance and it's in service to the divine light. However, if you see a blue horse, which some might know that this shows up in Revelations, and some might know that there's a big statue in front of the Denver airport of blue horses. And this means that these horses are in service to the hidden. So there's a darker aspect to that symbology. What we will hear about here is rods or spokes, which denote kingly faculty, productivity, the structure of the universe, and the straight and narrow. And we will see geometry, geometric forms, as was talked about by Plato, and as will be talked about by the celestial hierarchy. The geometry is the building and completing foundation. So to those that have read like a bunch of Terence McKenna or have taken heroic doses of sacred medicine, it is often experience of this unfolding geometry, this dream sequence of geometry that sometimes you see more in old movies. And the Christian celestial hierarchical understanding of this phenomenon is that you are seeing the realm of the soul and the realm of what builds manifestation. So the geometry is what makes manifestation and density capable. But I'm getting off track a little bit. Gold and silver are incorruptible, unexpended. They have brilliancy, luminance, and radiance. And brass and copper are even more holy in this way because they have all those same aspects, but it also includes fire, which, as I mentioned, is the Godhead itself, or the best symbolism of the Godhead. As we will see too, often in both Revelations and in the Ezekiel, which we'll be reading, they often use stones as symbolism too. So white stones are luminance, red stones are fiery, yellow stones are golden, which has all the same characteristics: brilliancy, luminance, radiance, incorruptible. Green is youthful, and the one that's important to us is lapis lazuli. Lapis shows up several times throughout the Bible, and this is royalty. And again, we are talking about who wrote this stuff, and during their time, lapis was just for the royals. So there's our kind of codex that gives us enough understanding to dive in to the actual text. So the first mention of the celestial hierarchy is in Genesis, where it's 24. After he drove the man out, this is when they're getting kicked out of Eden, he was placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden. Cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. And again, the Kabbalah, sure. The sword, and again, is symbolic of a division. It's something that's cutting something away from what it isn't. So this is the first mention of cherubim. And again, they don't give any context. So that's why I'm here to give the context. So we're getting into Ezekiel. And for those that aren't familiar, Ezekiel is this giant vision that was given to a man. And I've kind of cut out its context. Well, anyway, I'll just get to it and let it explain itself. I looked and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north. An immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. In appearance, their form was human, intellectual capacity, hands. But each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight. Their feet were like those of a calf and gleamed with burnished bronze. Under their wings, on their 4 sides, they had human hands. All 4 of them had faces and wings. And the wings of one touched the wings of another. Each one was straight ahead. They did not turn as they moved. Their faces looked like this. Each of the 4 had the face of a human being, and on the right side, each had the face of a lion, and to the left, the face of an ox, and each had the face of an eagle. So I'm going to continue, but right away, you're getting all this symbolism. And it's not that this is literally a form of a creature. It's all the symbolism that I've been telling you. These are all the attributes that this being holds, but this being is not a physical realm, so it is not, you cannot describe it using physical terms, but you can describe it through massive symbolism. So we'll continue. The appearance of the living creatures was like burning coals of fire or like torches. Fire moved back and forth among the creatures. It was bright and lightning flashed out of it. The creatures sped back and forth like flashes of lightning. As I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. This was the appearance and structure of the wheels. They sparkled like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel intersecting a wheel. So this, before I continue, these are the geometrical forms, and it won't name them. The creatures with all the heads, those are the cherubim, and the spinning wheels are the thrones. Their rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around. When the living creatures moved, the wheels moved beside them. And when the living creatures rose from the ground, the wheels also rose. Wherever the spirit would go, they would go, and the wheels would rise along with them, because the spirits of living creatures were in the wheels. So, like I mentioned before, this is just like the reincarnation wheels from before. This is just like what the Greeks were talking about, that all the living creatures are within the wheels. So you're seeing, a man is seeing the greater functions of the cosmos reflected inside of these wheels. So we can think of it like, I'm not sure what the Buddhists call it, but it's just like that. So let's continue. Spread out above the heads of the living creatures was what looked like a vault sparkling like crystal. Again, brilliancy, light. Above the vault over their heads was what looked like a throne of lapis lazuli, and high above on the throne was the figure of that of a man. And I'm cutting it off there because this is the part where God shows up. And mind you, during that, God, the rest of Ezekiel is basically this giant oration of God, and he takes the form of just flames. So the last part of Ezekiel that I want to touch on. So their entire bodies, including their backs, their hands, and their wings, were completely full of eyes, as they were 4 wheels. I heard the wheels being called the whirling wheels. Each of the cherubim had 4 faces, and this is where he actually names them cherubim. One face was that of the cherub, the second the face of a human being, the third the face of a lion, the fourth the face of an eagle. And the last, and here we're finally done with Ezekiel, and the last reference to cherubim and thrones in the Bible, which is more direct at least, there's plenty of alludings, but it's in Revelations, and it says, also in front of the throne there were what looked like a sea of glass, clear as crystal, and in the center of it, around the throne, were 4 living creatures, and they were covered with eyes in front and in back. Okay, so that covers Ezekiel, and you'll see too, to kind of bring it back to that Terence McKenna interpretation, that oftentimes the experience of what they experience in sacred medicines, especially ayahuasca and DMT, is that these creatures say, do not fear me, do not be afraid. And that is a quote that's not only testimony from people who've experienced it, but you also find it in this mysticism. And that, again, these creatures are covered with eyes, which seems, of course, like something that would freak somebody out. So again, are we interpreting this as massive symbolism, or are we interpreting this as literal embodiments of these creatures? So I've done the cherubim, and one thing I should clarify before I move on is people would often think that cherubs were those small little angel babies that they sometimes see in like Renaissance art, but actually those are what's called putti, P-U-T-T-I, or maybe it's P-O-T-T-I, and they are something completely different. They are not in the Christian celestial hierarchy, although there's a good reason for why they were confused with the cherubs, and that was because the embodiment of a child being pure and unadulterated would be a good symbol for this higher realm of the spirit, but not as it's literally spoken in the Bible. So that's where the confusion came from. And mind you too, certain interpretations of God himself have been, and mind you, I say himself because we're talking Christianity here, is because certain interpretations of God have been to the likeness of a child as well. And in that way, not to say that he is naive, but it's to say that he is unaffected, unconditioned, uncontrolled. So the other one that we can actually get into a little bit is the seraphim, which this is Hebrew for seraph, which means to burn. So again, we're using the burning analogy. The other weird interpretation of this word is that it's very close to the Hebrew word for serpent, which we could dive into the kind of more conspiracy end of that. So I'm taking this one from Isaiah, and after this I'll be done with all the quotes, so we'll be done with, me reading scripture, but this one's from Isaiah. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. So this is different. They have 6 wings as opposed to the cherubs, which have 4, okay? With 2 wings covering their faces, with 2 covering their feet, and with 2 that were flying. And they were calling to one another, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. Take note, they said holy 3 times. This is important. At the sound of their voices, the doorpost and the threshold shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Again, fire, smoke, clouds, okay? Skip to Revelations. Each of the 4 creatures had 6 wings and was covered with eyes all around. So cherubim, Sephirim, both have eyes all around, and under its wings. Day and night, they never stop saying, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. who was and is to come. So this holy, holy, holy is what's called a trihagion. And it's the number 3, which numerologically represents stability and significance. It also represents the beginning, middle, and the end. So holy, holy, holy. And it also represents the spirit, which is the top 3, the soul, which is the next 3 on the celestial hierarchy, and then the body, the next 3 on the celestial hierarchy. So the ninefold path, 3, 3, 3. Now, mind you, too, this is me kind of throwing things off a little bit, but maybe some of you know, but I also do palmistry. And with each of the fingers, there's the 3 portions of each finger. The top phalange, the middle phalange, and the bottom phalange, first, second, and third. And in reading, in palmistry, it goes the same way. The top is the mental or the spirit. The middle is the practical or the soul. And the bottom is the body. So in this way, this understanding of the Trinity and of the spirit, the soul, and the body bleeds well into traditions well outside of Christianity. If anything, Christianity inherited this tradition. So I'll get back to it. So the reason why the Sephirim have the wings covering their faces is because, mind you, these are the entities that are closest to God, which is like allness and all fire, right? They cover their face out of humility. And they don't want to be deemed as unworthy. And especially to this God. This is Old Testament God, so this is the one that would destroy anything. And the reason they're covering their feet with their other 2 wings is to refuse to reveal any unclean aspects. So both of the top and the bottom are them shielding themselves from a certain form of judgment, that they are not Him or the Godhead, that they are not the all, that they are not the thing. And the last 2 wings, being ready to fly, are used to show their faithfulness. So this, again, makes it seem that it's more of a symbolism than anything. So at this point, I'm gonna. That's where the Bible really mentions these higher angelic forms. It is also going to mention the archangels and the angels. So that leaves us a big middle area. So I'm going to share something else with you guys on the screen. Let's see here. I think this will be it. Yeah, right here. So this is how the regular order goes, and just to kind of dissect it some more. So the seraphim are those that are nearest to God to basically worship Him 24/7. So their appearances are more rare. Now, this first hierarchy is completely spirit. So this is the original emanation, which means that they have no true forms. They are the least of all densities. So this would be the most subtle energy of, I would say, the universe, but it's bigger than that, right? And the cherubim would be the ones that would actually be doing more of the work. So as it says, they are around more to ponder over the ideas. So this is all a kind of a tier system. The thrones is to transform the ideas into action. And so that is why they are the cusp of the next hierarchy, because like it said, they are the wheels, and the wheels turning is going to kind of birth the second hierarchy. So the next 3 that we see, and I got something else for you guys too. Don't mind the pause here. Unless it's gone, maybe it's gone. Anyway, the dominions, These are using the older terms, Kyrios, the dominions, the virtues, and the powers. So this whole section is the least mentioned because this would be kind of viewed as the buffer zone.
Y'all, I re-record this in the morning.
So this area is basically
I picked
how
up some noise in the
universe will be governed. So the thrones transform